more than just steel and gears. It pulls you in and doesn't let go.
Okay, hello, welcome back to the Carousel. Today we're going to talk about the whole Iran versus Israel thing, and of course through the lens of propaganda. Now, this is not going to be anywhere near as good as my last stream, which was about propaganda with regard to the public protests, the whole King's Day thing, and the immigration protests. And that's because I'm not really a huge geopolitics guy. I don't really know what I'm talking about when it comes to Israel. I don't really know what I'm talking about when it comes to international affairs or war. I'm not like a war guy. When everybody says, oh, does your boyfriend think about Rome every day? And all the guys are like, yeah, I never think about Rome. I don't really care about Rome. So yeah, I'm not really like one of these guys that like knows too much about this stuff. But that being said, I do think it's interesting to sort of get some ideas out here with regard to all the stuff that's flying in our faces in relation to the Iran-Iraq conflict, Iran and Israel conflict that America is being rapidly drawn into. Now, I want to begin by sharing a very interesting tidbit about propaganda in the lens of wars in the Middle East. So, who remembers the movie The Rock, starring Nicolas Cage? It's a fantastic movie. Michael Bay at his absolute best, Sean Connery, Nicolas Cage. And Nicolas Cage plays a scientist who works for the FBI or the CIA, I think, and he has to save the world from a group of rebel soldiers led by Ed Harris. Fantastic. He should have won an Oscar for this. And in it, his name's Stanley Goodspeed, and in it, anybody who's ever seen The Rock will remember what the VX gas, which is the chemical weapon that is being used by these rogue soldiers to do a chemical attack on San Francisco from Alcatraz. So that's why it's called The Rock. It takes place on Alcatraz. And everybody will remember the way that these VX gas balls were presented in the film. I'm sharing a picture of it right now, but if you're just listening to it, they were these green glass balls that sort of hung down in a tube. And you instantly think of these glass balls when you remember this film. And because they're very iconic, and they were almost plasticky, but they were also kind of glass, and they were always breaking. At one point, he puts a glass ball in somebody's mouth and like shuts his mouth. And he, of course, like explodes with the disease. And at another point, he dives and has to save a glass ball from falling off the cliff, because the second the glass ball breaks, everybody dies in the vicinity, because this VX gas is so poisonous. So we all remember these balls from the movie The Rock. And what's interesting is that later on, these glass balls are completely made up. This is not how these chemicals are stored. It's just sort of a genius stroke from Michael Bay or whoever the production designer was, the prop guy, to create these little glass balls. But they're completely made up. But during the global war on terror, we all remember this big lie. There's this giant lie that made it so that the United States got involved in invading Iraq and Afghanistan, and got involved in what is now referred to as the Forever War, which lasted 20 odd years and many, many innocent people dead, and lots of terrible pictures of Marines killing people in various ways. We all remember Abu Ghraib, these people being tortured. this sort of long, bumbling, stupid war that didn't really lead to anything. The beginning of all that was based on this lie about weapons of mass destruction that somebody, I guess it was Saddam, had to invade Iraq. I guess we'd already invaded Afghanistan by this point, but to invade Iraq, we needed to know that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. This was a big thing when I was a kid, and when everybody was constantly talking about the weapons of mass destruction and do they have them? Do they have them? And later it turned out that the intel that we had weapons of mass destruction was a total lie. So us getting involved in the Iraq war was based on a phony report. At the core of that phony report lies the movie The Rock, believe it or not, because the report that was used as justification to invade Iraq, the reason it was ultimately decided and figured out that it was fake was because it described the weapons of mass destruction that Saddam had as the same as those green balls, which were fake. So scientists were like, that doesn't make any sense. These green balls don't exist. That's from a movie. And then that's why WMDs, weapons of mass destruction, to this day, which was the basis of the entire global war on terror for 20 years, was from the movie The Rock, and it was from this big lie. So let me just read this Wikipedia because it's so fascinating. In September 2002, MI6 chief Sir Richard Dearlove said the agency had acquired information from a news source revealing that Iraq was stepping up production of chemical and biological warfare agents. The source, who is said to have direct access, claimed senior staff were working 7 days a week while the regime was concentrating a great deal of effort on the production of anthrax. Dearlove told the chairman of the Joint Intelligence Community, Sir John Scarlett, that they were on the edge of a significant intel breakthrough, which could be the key to unlock Iraq's weapons program. However, it was noticed that the agent's description of the glass containers, not typically used for chemical munitions, resembled the nerve gas inaccurately depicted in glass beads or spheres in The Rock. By February 2003, a month before the invasion of Iraq, MI6 concluded that their source had been lying over a period of time, but failed to inform Number 10 or others, even though Prime Minister Tony Blair had been briefed on the intelligence. The false claims of weapons of mass destruction were the justification for the UK's entering the war. So maybe this wasn't the basis of all of Americans, but it was certainly the basis of the coalition, which included UK. And then so screenwriter David Weisberg said what was so amazing was anybody in the poison gas community would immediately know that this was total bullshit. Such obvious bullshit, Weisberg said. He was unsurprised as a desperate agent might resort to films for inspiration, but dismayed that authorities didn't do apparently the most basic fact-checking or vetting of the information. If you just asked a chemical weapons expert, it would have been immediately obvious that it was ludicrous. So an entire country invaded another country because of bullshit intelligence that was quite obviously fake, and it was based on these balls. So this is all to say, in the background of all of this Israel stuff, in terms of propaganda, is this fear, is this notion that there is a lie, that there is lying happening, and that the lying is happening either by Israel or by America or by whoever, and that those lies are going to ultimately determine the fate of very, very many people, and people who are going to die, and people who are going to be horribly injured in this war, and in this potential war that is coming up between Iran and Israel that the United States is getting rapidly dragged in to. So, there's this whole concept about the big lie. The big lie is the bigger the lie. This was a Hitler thing. The bigger the lie, the easier it is to tell, because if you have a really super big lie, people are sort of naturally less inclined to believe it. So right now, in going on in the background of the question of is the U.S. going to get involved in this thing with Iran and all this propaganda is this a lie? And who is lying and why are people lying? My friend Josiah had this hilarious, great tweet. If I can get it to show up here. He shows a picture of Powell during the Colin Powell during this whole global war on terror thing, holding up what's supposedly a anthrax or some weapon of mass destruction that the other side never had. And Josiah's tweet is, "Here it is, conclusive proof that Iran is days away from a nuclear weapon. Israel must strike now, and we should help them. Saddam cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon." So he's recalling the war on terror to say that, look, we got to be careful about what we're being told here, because who knows? Maybe we're being told a complete story in order to justify this invasion or getting Americans involved in this war that could be completely fake. So also, a friend shared with me a New York Times report that there is no new intelligence that the Trump administration is aware of that Iranians are building a bomb. Or building any bomb, a nuclear bomb, in any greater way than they were before. So this would lead someone to believe, if you take this all the way through, contrary to Israeli claims, senior administration officials were unaware of any new intelligence showing that Iranians were rushing to build a nuclear bomb. So if you believe this New York Times report, what that would suggest is maybe, yeah, this is all a big lie. Now, do I believe this is a big lie? I have no idea. I have no clue. Again, I don't know enough about these things. It would seem to me that if I'm Iran, I'm building a nuclear weapon. I'm going to do it. So, if I am Iran, knowing Iran, that it's this, very stubborn, theocratic state of hardcore Muslims, am I going to allow the world to tell me I can't have nuclear technology and not have nuclear weapons? Of course not. Of course, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to build a bomb. So, but does that mean that there was new intelligence on this, or this wasn't some giant Israeli sort of psyop in order to get people to go along with this? I really have no idea. Now, in terms of what is actually happening, before we get into why people tend to sort of think that Israel is not playing by the rules. I want to show the very beginning of the Bannon War Room, which goes through kind of both sides of propaganda. This was a thing that he did with Tucker, and it's really, really good. And so I just want to show this really quickly, if I can figure out how to mute this side screen, which I cannot seem to figure out how to do. But yeah, we're just going to have to watch these really ridiculous Rumble ads for 2 seconds so that we can see. This is okay. So I'm wholesale ripping off Steve Bannon right now. And so sorry, Steve, I like you, and I'm sorry I'm ripping this off, but this was the intro to the Tucker episode of the War Room that just happened. The Tucker episode itself, actually, I didn't find all that interesting, but I did find this beginning montage of clips to be very fascinating and telling about sort of what's going on. So I'm just going to play this. I'm hoping that the sound is shared. Let me just make sure that the sound is shared. Yeah, also share tab audio. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to play this, and you don't really need to watch it. I think if you could hear it, you will immediately understand what's being said here. So hold on. So we're seeing explosions. We're seeing explosions happening in Tehran.
Why did you launch this operation now?
Because we were facing an imminent threat, a dual
This is
existential threat. One, the threat of Iran rushing to weaponize their enriched uranium to make atomic bombs with a specific and declared intent to destroy us. Second, a rush to increase their ballistic missile arsenal into the capacity that they would have 3,600 weapons a year, new weapons within 3 years, 10,000 ballistic missiles, each one weighing a ton, coming in at Mach 6 right into our cities, as you saw today. And then in 6 years, 20,000. That's no country can sustain that, and certainly not a country the size of Israel. So we had to act, it was the 12th hour. We did act to save ourselves, but also, I think, to not only protect ourselves, but protect the world from this incendiary regime. We can't have the world's most dangerous regime have the world's most dangerous weapons. We're protecting ourselves, but by doing so, we're protecting many others.
Now, we have significant military assets in the region. We have significant military assets in every region. So the isolationists who are appeasers, who will get us all killed, they believe we should just pull back from everywhere. NATO, Europe,
This is Mark Levin
Africa,
talking.
Middle East. What are we doing there? We're protecting ourselves. That's what we're doing there. They're forward bases. We have allies like Israel who are fighting wars that really help us too. We have a base in Qatar. Israel didn't put it there. We have a base in Iraq. Israel didn't put that one there either. We have locations and bases throughout the Middle East that have absolutely nothing to do with the state of Israel or even defending the state of Israel. So what should we do? Should we withdraw? Say, you know what? China, North Korea, Russia, Iran, all the terrorist groups, you can have the Middle East, you can have the oil, you can have the navigable waters, we're out of here. Really? I'd love to see the plan of the isolationists and the pacifists and the appeasers. I would love to see it. They don't have a plan. They'll get us all killed. So we need to protect our bases. And so people are saying, what? Israel shouldn't defend itself because the enemy might attack some of our bases? Does that make sense to anybody? Wouldn't it be better to take out the enemy?
So this is more bombing footage.
Tulsi Gabbard testified on Capitol Hill,
Netanyahu
saying
back.
that everything had been suspended since 2003 and had not restarted, that the nuclear program had not been restarted by the Iranians. So did something change from end of March until this week? Was the U.S. intel wrong?
The intel we got and we shared with the United States was absolutely clear. Was absolutely clear that they were working in a secret plan to weaponize the uranium. They were marching very quickly. They would achieve a test device and possibly an initial device within months and certainly less than a year. That was the intel we shared with the United States. I think we have excellent intel in Iran. I think we've proven that. And that is something that we couldn't possibly accept. Whether it would be 6 months or 12 months or 13 months is immaterial. Once they go that route, it's too late. And we will not have a second Holocaust, a nuclear Holocaust. We already had one in the previous century. The Jewish state is not going to have the Holocaust meted on the Jewish people. It's not going to happen. Never again is now, and we had to act now.
As President Trump said just yesterday, it's his movement.
This is Tom Cotton,
He helped create
Senator.
and shape and direct the Make America Great Again movement. He's the one that's defined the contours of the America First foreign policy. He's the one who was elected by the American people. Just like 535 members of Congress were elected by the American people to make these decisions, not so-called influencers or podcasters. No offense, but they don't have authority and accountability under our constitutional system. So President Trump is right that he's the one that sets the course for foreign policy. Congress has its say, obviously, as well, and that we simply cannot trust the Ayatollahs of Iran to have the nuclear weapons. Maybe one day the meek will inherit the earth, Mark, but until then, the strong have to protect it.
Okay, Tom Cotton. Okay, Tom, coming down on us podcasters. Who knows why? But anyway, look, when you see that, you're seeing not even really propaganda. You're seeing propaganda in the oldest sense of the word, in the sense that these people are making actually a pretty straightforward argument. And Netanyahu, when he says, hey, never again, we're not going to let them nuke us, I think that's a good argument, right? I mean, you hear him say that and you're like, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. If this is an existential thing and they're going to get a nuke and they're going to drop it on you right away, when he says, hey, never again, you kind of believe him. You're like, okay, yeah, I get it. And then we got Tom Cotton out here, saying, hey, we got to be the world police. So we can't let these people, we got to be realistic. What happens when they get a nuke? And you know what's really interesting? This messaging is going everywhere. I opened up Disney Plus to watch something with my daughter last night. On the front of Disney Plus is Netanyahu giving some sort of speech. So we're getting the argument from that side that's very clear. Now, what's different this time is that in previous times in my life, this type of propaganda, this pro-Israel sort of propaganda, it really wasn't, there wasn't a ton of pushback on it. People generally sort of accepted it, and they didn't really think too much about it. Now in today's world, all the smart people, or many of the smart people, seem to be saying, no, not so fast. We're not going to actually listen to this because they think that it's a lie. They think that this is a lie. And that actually there is no new intelligence, that this is all for some reason a propaganda approach or campaign by Israel to just sort of justify attempting to drag America into this war with Iran. But again, it kind of raises the question, why? Like, why would they do that now, especially given everything that's going on in Gaza? I mean, unless maybe this is some sort of how related to Gaza. So let's let good old Barry Weiss weigh in here. So Barry is wanting people to, or not, maybe she's talking a little bit more about Fordo, which was the name of this nuclear facility that supposedly was destroyed by this Israeli attack. And here she is talking with two other people who are basically saying that this could very easily turn into a ground invasion, which is like, you know, that's a big deal, especially if America's involved. So let's hear what she has to say.
Dexter, tell us what exists at Fordo and why this has become the locus of all of the discussion about the war.
Well, Fordo is a giant enrichment plant that was, you know, the Iranians never announced that they even had it, and it was discovered by American intelligence, sitting in the middle of the desert. I think what's difficult about it is it's under 300 feet of concrete, and so I had a conversation recently with a senior, just former White House official, somebody from the Biden administration, and they said he said, I don't think that Israel can do this, can destroy Fordo from the air by itself. The United States can do that, you know, with B-2s and B-2 bombers and 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs. But they have to destroy Fordo. But he said, the Israelis might be able to do it if they're willing to put people on the ground. And he said at the time, this official, they are practicing to do that right now. That was like a month ago.
Wow.
He said they're practicing. Yeah, they're practicing. So I wonder, I'm guessing here based on that conversation, but I wonder if what we're seeing is a kind of a preparation for something like that, where there's a landing of a lot of Israeli soldiers to try to go into Fordo. If in fact, which I think was made clear to me by the White House many times, the Israelis don't have enough to destroy Fordo on their own from the air. They have to put people on the air.
Okay, so this guy is laying out another pretty straightforward argument, again, all under the guise that there is this nuclear program going on and that Israel has pretty much no choice to destroy it at any means necessary, including either invading on the ground or getting America involved. Why do they have to get America involved? Because Israel doesn't have these big B-52 bombers that can drop the correct type of bomb that can just destroy the thing. They would have to get America to do that for them. Now, obviously, Americans don't want that to happen because we don't want to invade Iran. Iran is Persia. You know, Iran is not Yemen. It's, you know, we've been bombing Yemen for 20 years. Nobody cares. Nobody knows what Yemen is. But Iran is very different. And Iran is connected to Russia. It's connected to China. This is like very close to World War type of stuff. And so this isn't just like some little thing. It's not just like, okay, we're gonna go do a ground invasion, or we're gonna fly B-52s over Tehran and drop bombs on it. That's like a pretty big deal. That's not just a normal thing. But on the other hand, you have Trump and JD. Look, again, I don't really have an agenda in this. I'm trying to figure this all out also. So I'm just like kind of sharing my thoughts. You also have Trump and JD, which I'll share this here, making the argument repeatedly that we cannot allow Iran to get a nuke because it's like, hey, this is a very hostile regime. Once they have a nuke, they can do whatever they want with it, and that's just the end of it. So Trump is saying that, and so it's looking real close to war. And here's what JD, who speaks in our internet language, has to say. Again, also making what seems to be a very clear-eyed, straightforward argument for why this needs to happen. So JD says, look, I'm seeing this from the inside, and I'm admittedly biased towards our president and my friend. But there's a lot of crazy stuff on social media, so I want to address some things directly on the Iran issue. First, POTUS has been amazingly consistent over 10 years that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Over the past few months, he encouraged his foreign policy team to reach a deal with Iranians to accomplish this goal. The president has made clear that Iran cannot have uranium enrichment, and he said repeatedly that this would happen one of two ways, the easy way or the other way, war. Second, I've seen a lot of confusion over the issue of civilian nuclear power and uranium enrichment. These are distinct issues. Iran could have civilian nuclear power without enrichment, but Iran rejected that. Meanwhile, they've enriched uranium far above the level necessary for any civilian purpose. They've been found in violation of their non-proliferation obligations by the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is hardly a right-wing organization. It's one thing to want civilian nuclear energy. It's another thing to demand sophisticated enrichment capacity. And it's still another thing to cling to enrichment while simultaneously violating basic non-proliferation obligations and enriching right to the point of weapons-grade uranium. I have yet to see a single good argument for why Iran needs to enrich uranium well above the threshold for civilian use. I've yet to see a single good argument for why Iran was justified in violating its non-proliferation obligations. I have yet to see a single good pushback against IAEA's findings. Meanwhile, the president has shown remarkable restraint in keeping our military's focus on protecting our troops and protecting our citizens. He may decide he needs to take further action to end Iranian enrichment. That decision ultimately belongs to the president. And of course, people are right to be worried about foreign entanglement after the last 25 years of idiotic foreign policy. But I believe the president has earned some trust on this issue. And having seen this up close and personal, I can assure you that he is only interested in using the American military to accomplish the American people's goals. Whatever he does, that is his focus. Now, what does that sound like? That sounds like we're going to war. That sounds like the decision has been made to fly B-52s over Iran and to drop B-52s on Iran. And, here is sort of the general point that I think I want to make here, which is that if this would actually, all the people, you hear Bibi, you hear Barry Weiss, you hear JD, you hear Trump, they're all actually making very clear-eyed, reasonable, rational arguments. They're all saying, this is actually, again, this is not clever propaganda. This actually strikes me as genuine. This strikes me as like people actually telling the truth. I don't really know if this is a lie. I mean, the New York Times report would suggest that this is a lie, right? But I don't know if I believe the New York Times. The impression I get that this is very clear-eyed, straightforward, sort of like telling us what's going on. Now, there's something, okay, what I want to kind of like say here is what I think that this actually is. This is a boy who cried wolf situation. This is a giant boy who cried wolf. This is, which, by the way, dates back, the earliest boy who cried wolf is from the Torah. It is from the Old Testament. It deals with Jacob. Yes. Sorry, let me just find. Okay, the boy who cried wolf. Okay. Joseph's brothers came. Joseph's brothers came to Jacob with Joseph's bloody coat, insinuating that Joseph had been killed. Jacob, at least on a conscious level, accepted their words. However, since in fact they had lied to him before, now when they told him that Joseph was alive, they did not believe him. So the original boy who cried wolf story, supposedly, whatever, is from the Torah. And the big issue here, the big thing that nobody is talking about, is that Israel has gone very, very far in executing what is called Hasbara on the mind of the American populace. Now, look, I am not anti-Israel. I am not saying that this is bad. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm not saying they don't have a right to exist. I'm not saying anything bad. I'm just saying Hasbara exists. They admit it. Everybody admits it. Hasbara is more underhanded propaganda. Now, they'll say it means anything, but we all know what AIPAC does. We know what they do to Thomas Massie. He told the story. They come to you and they say, hey, write an article. We'll give you a bunch of money to your campaign. Write an article about how Israel's great. And if you don't do it, by the way, we're going to fund your opponent to the tune of $14 million. That's sort of Hasbara. What Hasbara actually means is just the proliferation of pro-Israel sort of posts and opinions throughout the internet. Now, after a while, it becomes boy who cries wolf. After there's a certain amount of these posts going on, people start to just stop believing anything you say. So what's funny is that right now, Israel actually seems to be telling the truth to me. I feel like they're actually like, yeah, actually this is real. But it's too late in a way. I mean, I don't know if it's too late completely, but it's certainly too late to get the support of the American people, because look what happened with Epstein. Look what happened with, people like Thomas Massie. Look, AIPAC, one of the biggest organizations in Congress. There are so many people sharing all of these posts talking about how much aid goes to Israel every single year. And it's just like, okay, well, the American people have now kind of or all people, especially in today's world, have sort of woken up to the fact that they're being manipulated. And they're kind of like, well, I don't really want to be manipulated that much by this foreign government. And, Bibi is out there saying, hey, I understand America first, but I don't understand America dead. And it's funny when he says that, because it's like, that's the first time I've heard him say he understands America first, because it's like, I think that really the public perception has changed against Israel. If you go and Google Operation Rising Lion. This is called Operation Rising Lion because of another Torah thing, some prediction from Balaam that Israel is going to rise like a lion in the future. But if you go and Google Operation Rising Lion, the first thing that comes up is a article called Ungentlemanly Robots, is Israel's Operation Rising Lion. All about, this whole article, which I'll read a little part of here, is all about sort of the underhanded ways in which Israel is fighting this war. That's the first thing that comes up on Google. That's a vibe shift. What else is a vibe shift? After October 7th, the first thing that the New York Times published was a justification of the invasion. Completely insane. What this tells you is the media class has defected. The media class is not down. They are not down to play this Israel game, because Israel has become horribly unpopular. On the left for bombing Gaza, on the right for manipulating American politics. They just have no more ammo they have no more bullets in the gun. They're scraping. It's boy who cried wolf. They're scraping to just say, hey, look at us. This is a very understandable situation. You don't want Iran to have a nuke. We don't want Iran to have a nuke. Come on. But it's like the American people just aren't down. You shouldn't have done Epstein. You absolutely should not have done Epstein. Look, who knows what the truth is, but I think it's I think the work has been done to show that he was an intelligence asset, and he was taking 13-year-olds, what's her name, was hanging out outside, whatever her name was, his sidekick, was hanging out outside, high schools in Florida and offering these girls like $500 to go, give them a hand job, and then they were in the network. It's sex trafficking. It's exploiting the daughters of America. Like, come on. Of course people, and then you kill, he's dead in his cell, all the cameras are broken. Like, you only have so many of these things you can do before you lose the people. And the people have been lost. You can see what the first thing you Google says you're doing an ungentlemanly war. Like, you've lost the support of the people. I'm sorry to tell you. Again, I'm not saying this is good. I think, as I've said, I think that actually in this instance, it's pretty just what Israel is doing. I think it kind of makes sense that they have to do this. I mean, unless it's all just like a giant lie. But it really does seem like kind of the propaganda battle has been lost, which is very funny because Israel puts so much effort into this thing called Hasbara, which I'll show a somewhat anti-Semitic video describing in a second. Not that I agree with it, but just to kind of describe what people think of when they think of Hasbara. But in the short run, I understand that this ungentlemanly warfare thing, it's not really one-to-one. The ungentlemanly warfare is sort of a descriptor for a certain type of guerrilla warfare. Okay, so I'm just going to read this for 1 second because I just don't want people to then accuse me of like misleading you. Okay, so what is ungentlemanly warfare and why is this the first result on Google when you Google Rising Lion? So just after midnight on June 13th, 2025, an Israeli operation codenamed Rising Lion unfolded. This is from a place called the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Who knows what that is? Maybe it's some sort of front for, again, who knows now? This used to be very black and white. It used to be Jews, the Holocaust, Jews disenfranchised, people trying to kill them, terrorists, Westerners. It's an easy choice. Nobody really, yeah, sure, okay, from the far lefties have always been pro-Gaza, but back in 2006, no one considered these things. Whereas it was very black and white back then. Now it's a very complicated thing. You don't know who's saying what. The Arab world has gotten very good at propaganda. They've basically copied the Israeli playbook. You see all kinds of false crap coming from them, for example, also on Twitter, by the way. You see like weird false posts that they're making, like to kind of make it seem like Israel is, they're trying to turn Americans against Israel. There was one of a woman. Okay, yeah, here's one. So this was a woman who's some Israeli cabinet member, Gila Gamliel, supposedly saying, "We categorically demand that the United States join the war against Iran," which is like infuriating, right? Somebody like me reads this and was like, "What do you mean categorically demand? Screw you, Gila." And it's also just this very specifically kind of Israeli obnoxious sort of vibe, right? And I'm mad. I'm like, screw this. I don't owe you anything. Like, get out of here. We fund you. You don't fund us. But then you look into it, and it's not true. She didn't say that. so this poor Gila woman, I'm not saying she's a poor woman. I don't know anything about her. But she didn't say this. She never said this categorically demand thing. They can't find a video. Nobody reported it. So this is a piece of propaganda on the other side. This is the Arab world learning how to seed. It's this very like Chinese, Russian thing. Like just seed division, wedge, tear the Americans, tear the MAGA crowd away from Israel, right? Which is what Bannon is leaning into, what everybody is doing. And they just see that wedge and they just hammer it with these fake posts like this. And once you see this fake post, I guarantee you 97% of the people who've seen this thing about Gila do not know that it's fake. And they're going to go text it to their friends on WhatsApp and be like, look, these fucking Israelis, look what they're doing. Yet again, with this entitled attitude towards us, even though, there are plenty of Jewish organizations like Tablet Magazine, who is, a friend, which I just wrote a influencer marketing piece in, by the way. This Actually, you can see it. I'll show it to you. But they have a new print thing. But Tablet Magazine says all the time, they're kind of base Jews, we should have no American aid to Israel for this exact reason. Because, this divide was inevitably going to come up. Now, too little too late, sorry to tell you, Tablet Magazine. I don't think at this point the ship has sailed on the American perception of Israel, because again, it's just gone on for so long, and this has gone so far. Here's another piece of more straightforward propaganda from the Arab world. So Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying that, so this is them sharing Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's a MAGA person. They're saying that this claim that Iran is about to be nuclear armed has been going back since 1992. And so in 1992, Iran was 3 to 5 years from nuclear capabilities, as somebody said. And then this same claim has been made every 2 years since then. Now, again, so you can see this wedge working. Marjorie Taylor Greene is turning completely against Israel, and she's taking the MAGA people with her. Again, there's a logical explanation for this, though, which is that they have been close to getting a nuclear weapon. It's just they keep being stopped from doing it. And I would say, knowing the Arab world and knowing the theocratic government that is there, of course they're trying to get a nuke. I mean, come on, right? Like, why would they not? They don't want to play by the rules. Like, of course, they're not going to let people tell them what to do. Like, I mean, to me, that just seems obvious. But again, really, we're in a boy who cried wolf situation. So let's hear a little bit more about this war. Once again, sorry this is all over the place. I am not, as I've said, a super international affairs guy. I'm just kind of trying to share with you what I think is interesting here. So here's this. The first result when you Google Operation Rising Lion. They say, just after midnight on June 13th, 2025, an Israeli operation codenamed Rising Lion unfolded in two distinct but mutually reinforcing acts. First came swarms of small explosive drones that Israeli commandos had reportedly pre-positioned inside Iran months earlier. That's like Dune. Remember when the guy's locked in the guy has to get to the thing weeks in advance, and he sits there and then he releases that little tiny drone thing. It's kind of like that. Pre-positioned it in Iran months earlier, striking air defense radars and communication nodes while decoying attention toward Tehran's western approaches. Minutes later, over 200 Israeli fighter aircraft, many of them F-35 Adirs, carrying standoff munitions, conducted precision strikes against more than 100 nuclear and military targets across Iran, including military leaders. So there you're seeing it doesn't sound like it was that targeted at nukes. It sounds like it was a little broader than that. The result was operational dislocation. Iranian early warning networks were saturated by low observable drones. Senior commanders were killed or forced into hardened shelters, and decision-making channels fractured just as long-range penetrating fires arrived. This shock and awe approach by Israel explains the limited initial Iranian response, firing only 100 drones compared to the mixture of over 200 drones and ballistic and cruise missiles fired during Operation True Promise in April 2024. So yeah, this already kind of happened once. Iran was already sort of attacked, and then they came back. So now, okay, so the attack illustrates how combinations of conventional long-range strikes and unconventional operations have a unique role in modern war, reminiscent of the dawn of modern special operations and the ungentlemanly warriors of the British Special Operations Executive and the U.S. Office of Strategic Services. So here we return to the Brits invading people as ungentlemanly warriors. So I find it pretty funny that they're saying, why not call them guerrillas? Can't they call this modern guerrilla warfare? Now, of course, they're calling Israel ungentlemanly, which is just okay, the branding just gets worse and worse. Advantage in battle when each side can see each other using even commercial satellite images goes to the side more able to generate asymmetries that produce shock and dislocation. This effect requires more than a standoff precision strike. It requires the ability to pair air power with special operations to generate effects across the depth of the battle space simultaneously. As a result, Operation Rising Lion is a blueprint for future joint campaigns and suggests key investments the U.S. military will need to adapt to the changing character of war. These include accelerating efforts to integrate special forces with low-cost drones, similar to the foundational work with Project Replicator, with long-range precision strike campaigns, alongside rethinking defense in order to protect critical assets. So now, and I'm just going to read one more paragraph about ungentlemanly warfare. While drones, stealth fighters, and global intelligence networks are new, combining conventional and unconventional warfare are not. During World War II, the British SOE and the US OSS pioneered sabotage, special reconnaissance, and raids, described during World War II as ungentlemanly warfare, and integrated them with larger conventional campaigns. The mandate of these agencies was to soften deep targets so conventional forces could attack at decisive points, yada, yada, yada. Israel's Rising Lion is an example of this. Now, this kind of implicates this whole thing of low-cost drones, which U.S. has a very hard time doing because we don't make consumer electronics in America anymore. So that's why this El Segundo movement, where these guys are making drones, is so important, because as we're seeing, ungentlemanly warfare is kind of like where things are going. Like, we're going to bury a bunch of drones in your sand, and then they're going to pop out like a year later when we need them to, like via AI. So that's kind of what this ungentlemanly warfare thing is. So anyway, this is all to say that how Israel is being painted. And now I'm going to share one thing about Hasbara. So as I said, Hasbara is the Israel propaganda efforts to constantly forward their cause. And I am of the belief that they just did too much of it. And that is why people are having such a hard time accepting the reality that actually this may be a real threat. So here I'm just going to play about 3 minutes of a guy who, I don't know what this guy's beliefs are, but I think that he's reflective of people's interpretation of Israel under this whole Hasbara thing.
News out of the Middle East. Israeli defense forces say
the Israeli military says Hamas,
as Israel says it targeted tunnels and weapons manufacturing sites.
Israel says
we spoke with the international spokesperson from the IDF, Richard Hecht.
Israeli authorities say
the Israelis say
Israel says
Israel's defense forces saying
Israel saying
that's according to the Israeli military.
Israel says
every single time. But over in Israel, prominent journalists stopped believing the military years ago. Back in 2015, Gideon Levy would write a scathing article in the Israeli Haaretz saying, quote, "The policy of denial and disconnection from reality is rising to a dangerous level, and the illness is getting worse. Israel further entrenches itself in its imaginary reality. It's all just a matter of Hasbara, the Israeli euphemism for propaganda." Now, the term Hasbara has its nuances. Hasbara is one of those wacky Israeli words that defy translation, but as senior Haaretz correspondent Anshel Pfeffer maintains, Hasbara is simply the act or profession of explaining. Even going so far as to say, Hasbara is now one of the basic tenets of 21st century Zionism. Indeed, many Israeli media outlets and think tanks are comfortable with this official-sounding interpretation. And in fact, Hasbara is a fully codified institution within the Israeli government. After the 2006 Lebanon War, the so-called Hasbara apparatus underwent a massive overhaul, which included the creation of a government office dedicated solely to Hasbara, the National Hasbara Headquarters within the Office of the Prime Minister. Its many arms extend to the Foreign Ministry, the Ministry of Diplomacy and Diaspora Affairs, the Ministry of Tourism, the Jewish Agency for Israel, and notably, the IDF Spokespersons Division, the propaganda arm of the Israeli military, tasked with operating the IDF's official website and blog, YouTube channel, Twitter, and other social media accounts. Hasbara is identified as not only a state diplomacy infrastructure, but also a cultural phenomenon. Nicholas Lehman of the Columbia Journalism School once described the propensity of so-called people of the book for disputations over text. Indeed, Hasbara appears to be distinctly steeped in religious fundamentalism. Just take the current head of the Israeli Hasbara apparatus, public diplomacy minister Distal Atbarian, whose plans for the future include denying that an Israeli occupation exists and that the Bible is the Jewish people's deed to the land. Other responsibilities as Hasbara...
So you can see here that this guy is upset about verbal tricks, verbal manipulations being used to justify things that aren't really real. It's all misleading. And, one thing I want to totally reject that he's saying is, it's all based in the book. Like, I'm actually going to say something right now that kind of goes in contrast to that. But it's not true, really, that there's nothing is more low IQ than when people are quoting the Talmud as evidence of anything about Judaism at all, because that's just not how it goes. So there's no secret text where we're all learning to lie and it's lying is okay, blah blah blah. I've studied Torah extensively with a rabbi. It is not, you're not learning secret lies to somehow, we gotta, the goys are animals and we need to manipulate them. Look, there's of course chauvinistic elements of Judaism, as there is in any religion, but I reject that. It's all in the book, and she's getting it from the book. But hold on, I'm going to give a caveat to that in 1 second. Before we finish up here, I just want to share. So, speaking of more propaganda coming from the other side, here we have BNO News tweeting, explosions heard in Tehran. And then we have Ethel Braithwaite, who looks like this sweet old boomer, saying, nothing heard here in Gainesville. We'll keep you informed. Thanks. And this is a meme saying, what do Americans care about this? Why do Americans care about this? So we're seeing this wedge being placed in between Ethel Braithwaite and Trump, who's saying, hey, we actually do need to pay attention to this. Now, of course, Ethel Braithwaite is also fake. Ethel Braithwaite is totally a fake account. Grandmother County Blue Ribbon winner. And then you kind of scroll down, you're like, wow, how is Ethel Braithwaite so based? She's really based. And then she starts posting memes of irritable youth in Michigan J. Frogman are the lioness ignores the little yapping mutt. It's this is a type of funny account. It's probably mostly comedy, right? But she's being interpreted as real and as a representative of the MAGA normals who don't give a shit about what's going on in Israel, which you can't blame them. Why do they give a shit about what's going on in Israel? They don't care. Here's a funny one. She says, good morning, IDF babes. I suspect Deborah McLean from the Bridge Club is possibly an Iranian asset or maybe a hummus agent. So, this is obviously comedy surrounding this thing. But man, this is the way that the cookie's crumbling. This is the winning. This is what most people are saying is the path forward. Even BAP, even our boy BAP, who is accused constantly of being a shill, is out there saying, hey, I'm sick of the lies. BAP, I think, is on. Yeah, look, here he is. Here's BAP saying, I can't take the lies and absurd pretense involved in this Iran nuclear debate. The old men who run Iran are decrepits who don't have the passion of youth, the passion for jihad. They want to nuke as insurance against regime change. They're not a threat to others. So he's coming out and saying, let's not get involved in this war, which most smart people seem to be saying. So it's going to cause a huge rift if Trump goes forward with it. Massive. And also, by the way, this regime change thing, kind of the takeaway here is that many people think that all of this is Hasbara propaganda for Israel wanting to conduct regime change in Iran. So they just want to get rid of the current very far right Islamic hardcore regime, and they want to bring back the nicer Persian people who would like Israel more. So I guess there you have it. There's the explanation, the supposed explanation for what this could all be a misleading lie over, which is that they just want regime change and it has nothing to do with nukes. They just want to get these people out, and now they're taking their opportunity to do that, maybe because of Gaza, maybe because Iran at some level is financing Gaza. So let me finish this up by returning to the Torah. So this is something that stuck with me that I found in like an illustrated version of a Torah. And this is, I'm going to kind of go against what I was just saying a second ago, that it's not like all this verbal manipulation is in the book. But I think there's actually a very innocent explanation to this. So there's the story in the Old Testament of Esau and Jacob. And Esau is kind of the violent, evil, redheaded brother. Jacob is his younger brother, but a nicer guy. And so through a various sequence of events, Jacob basically tricks his father, Isaac, into giving Jacob the blessing, like the family blessing, like you're going to be the father of the rest of the Jews forever. That's supposed to go to Esau, but instead it goes to Jacob because Jacob comes in and sort of pretends to be Esau. So there's a deception there, right? And thereafter, Jacob does become the father of the rest of the Jews, and Esau becomes like the father of all the bad guys. And the way these two groups are described is the Esau children, the Edomites, are violent, and they make their bread by the sword. And the Israelites, the sons of Jacob, the Jews, make their bread with their voices. So what I'm kind of trying to say here is that it's not a big surprise if you actually read the Torah that the Jewish state is their primary defense is verbal. It's about the voice. It's about the press. It's about the media, because that's a weapon. That's their weapon, right? Now, here is how the prophecy goes. So the secret of Jewish power will be their voice. They will defeat their enemies not through being expert soldiers, but through their voice, their prayers and Torah learning. But Esau's nation will have their power in their hands, that is, the weapons they hold in their hands to kill their enemies. When the voices of Jewish children can be heard learning Torah, then Esau's nation will have no power over them. But when the Jews don't teach their children Torah, they will suffer at the hands of Esau's nations. So I would, hint, perhaps the secular globo homo Zionist government of Israel that doesn't really read its own Torah all that often, maybe if it was reading the Torah more, it would be less inclined to engage in misleading Hasbara, and then perhaps Esau's nations would be less inclined to go after them. And, this is coming from great love for the Jewish people. I don't blame them for this. I think that having your voice be look, everybody has an evolutionary strategy. Every group has a strategy that they used as their power. And it's okay if the Jews is their voice, hey, that's better than a lot of other ones, right? So it's totally fine that that's the power. But when you lose the values, when you lose the book, your power starts to work against you, which I think is kind of what has happened here to a degree. And then finally, anyway, we don't need to that's pretty much how the prophecy goes. So in any case, just to return to the themes here, I think we're sort of seeing a true paradigm shift in America. We're seeing Israel, who was once a sort of all-powerful, all-forgiven, Steven Spielberg, Saving Private Ryan, Schindler's List, really the ultimate sort of like thing that Americans stood up for as, hey, we're going to stand up for this little guy. We're going to stand up for this little guy, which the Jews have been. And, we believe in freedom of religion, which was a great thing. I think that story, but through decades of Hasbara and through decades of manipulation, the time ran out on it. And I think that's something that I've been warning my liberal Jewish family members for forever. It's like, hey, if you guys keep counting white people, if you keep allowing this double standard, eventually they're not going to really, the Jews have a demographic problem. That's what we have always had. There's not enough. And so when people stop caring about being called anti-Semitic, the whole paper tiger falls apart. And it's a huge problem. It's a huge issue because once the support is lost, that voice, when people stop listening to the voice, the strength is the voice. When people stop listening to the voice, it doesn't work anymore. And so I think what we're seeing here is that people are starting to tune out that voice. And the answer is to return to the foundational principles. It's to return to the Torah and to start worrying about that more so than trying to convince everybody all the time through underhanded methods, through lies, and certainly through trying to undermine Americans via like attacking politicians who are America first. It's again like the Bibi saying, I understand America first, but not America dead. I think that's a pretty good phrase, but it's like, I don't really know if Bibi did understand America first before. Like, I think that the Americans have sort of insisted, we're not doing this anymore. We don't view you as enough of a victim anymore to constantly play the role of savior. At a certain point, I think Americans started kind of seeing this differently. And I think that this stuff always happens overnight. It doesn't take forever. It's not a slow burning thing. I think basically October 7th, that was just boom. And since then, everything has been different. And I think this is very different. And what I will say is, we better not fucking invade Iran. I don't think that that's a good idea. I think that that will basically be the end of. I love Trump. I've been Trump for a decade. But if he invades Iran, even if it's by air, I think that's a pretty fucking big problem, because you're gonna get China and it's just you're creeping so close to world war. So anyway, that's my opinion. I am America first. I believe in America. This is my country. I'm an American first and foremost. My ancestors founded this country. I love Judaism and Jewish people as well, but I think you can be Jewish and American at the same time. I know the Groypers, of course, disagree with this, but just because my ancestors who were WASPs, early settlers, they married a Jew, I'm not American anymore, even though the Jews had also been here for hundreds of years. Like, come on, that's of course ridiculous. But again, what I care about is America, and I'll join my more religious brethren in the Jewish community that aren't even, they don't necessarily think of themselves as Zionists in the political sense, because political Zionism was a leftist movement. That was a left-wing push, someone like Soros later on, to just save the Jews at any cost. So the Zionist government isn't like religious Jews, and that's why a lot of religious Jews hate the Zionist government, So I care about the Jewish people, the Jewish religion. It's the foundation of Western life. That's good. But the government of Israel, I don't have any loyalty to them whatsoever. I am an American only. That is all that I am. And I don't think any foreign entity should be meddling with Americans. What do you think is going to happen? It's just not going to work. The numbers don't add up. You can't, Abraham Lincoln, you can fool all the people some of the time, some of the people all the time. You can't fool all the people all the time. And eventually, enough people are going to be pissed off by being lied to and manipulated that they're just going to tune out. And when the voice is gone, the power is gone. Anyway, okay, this is my very long, extremely absurd, very poorly informed stream on Middle Eastern propaganda. Okay, have a good one.